Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Maths My Way webinar for 1st to 6th class. You're very welcome. My name is Ciara Walsh, and I am the head of primary publishing here at Folan's. And it's been my absolute pleasure to work on the Maths My Way programme with a wonderful team of authors, editors, designers, and so on for the past 3 to 4 years at this stage. It was a long time in the making. So let me get started with our agenda for this evening. So we'll hopefully be about an hour this evening, and that's broken down into different sections. So first of all, we're going to have Patrick Neary, who is our series editor and co-author for 1st to 6th class, talking through a little bit about what it's like to use Maths My Way, and sharing some experiences from using it with his own class this year. Then we will be joined by two other teachers who have implemented Maths My Way in their school this year, Siobhan Costello and Maggie Landers. And we're going to have a little bit of a discussion with Patrick, Siobhan and Maggie about that experience of introducing Maths My Way into their school, how they've gotten on with it, the challenges they faced and how they've overcome them. Then we will have a Q&A, again with Patrick, Siobhan, Maggie and myself. Some questions we've already had in advance. Thank you for anyone who has submitted those. And please do feel free to ask other questions during the webinar using the chat facility. And so at the very end then, I will do a little wrap up, tell you all about next steps, where to go if you want to trial the programme, get samples, all of that. And then hopefully we'll get you out into the nice sunny evening out there. So without further ado, let me introduce Patrick, and I'll stop sharing my slides. Patrick can share his.
Thanks, Ciara. So hopefully now you can see my slides.
Yep, that's
great. It's great to see so many people here again. For anyone who has been on with us before, it's great to be talking to you again about Maths My Way, and for anyone who it's your first time, my name is Patrick Neary and I'm teaching in Scoil Cronan, Senior National School in Swords in County Dublin. This year I'm teaching 3rd class, but I've been right across the school teaching the different class levels. I've always had an interest in maths and went back to do a master's in DCU, focusing on maths education. And after that went on to do some part-time lecturing with the BEds there in DCU as well. That's really kind of where I got the idea of wanting to work on a project like Maths My Way, because I had an idea of how I wanted to teach maths, but I couldn't see anything out there that kind of helped me do that in line with the Irish curriculum. So it really came from that desire of wanting to put something different out there. As Ciara mentioned, I was one of the authors across 1st to 6th class and series editor across the program. So it's lovely to go from like writing the different units, the different lessons, then into editing, where we looked at every single lesson across the books from 1st to 6th. And then this year teaching 3rd class with the program and actually getting to see it come alive then in the classroom. So it's lovely to get to see that this year and see what it looks like when the children are using it. And today I was working with a group of children, and one thing I asked them, we were working on maths, and I asked them, what do you love about maths? Or what's your favorite thing about maths? And some of the answers they gave were like, maybe particular topics that they felt very comfortable with. More of them mentioned that feeling of like figuring something out, solving a problem and coming up with a solution or finding an answer. That whole that idea of that eureka moment, I guess. And it's just something I'd like to think about at the start of tonight's session, that as teachers here or school leaders, like, what do you love about maths? What do you love about teaching it? For me, it's when someone who was finding something tricky or was finding a topic difficult has that moment, light bulb moment, where it's like, I get it now. And it's worth thinking about like what are your favorite bits about teaching maths, because I think that's going to have a huge impact on the program that you choose for your school. um One other thing just to mention is the difference between, like I said, this is our first year using Maths My Way in our school, and there's a big difference between when we started in September and now. So, in September, we were all getting used to the new curriculum, getting used to the new program, whereas now we've definitely found our feet with it. And, the children have responded really well to the program, and have gotten really used to how it works. So it's nice to see that progression through the school year as well. Where this all comes from, I guess, or why we have this new program is the new primary mathematics curriculum. And here you'll see the layout of implementation of the new curriculum. So it was first introduced back in 2023 with September 2024, that school year being earmarked for implementation when we got our training days, with then September 2025 onwards being marked for embedding. But it's important to remember that this is gradual and very much a flexible process for school. This school year, we have the introductory phase of the primary curriculum framework. So I'm sure many of you have had your closure day for that already, or maybe the second one coming up now. But from next year onwards, we'll be engaging in that structured support by curriculum area. So you'll have 6 years to choose each of the curriculum topics, working towards embedding it, I guess, over the entire curriculum over the next 6 years. And when we choose STEM, you'll be looking at the entire STEM specification. So it won't be just maths on its own, but it'll also be the science, technology, and engineering in there as well. So the message here, I guess, is that, there's a lot of change at the minute coming our way with the primary curriculum framework, with all of the different subject areas, but that it's not going to be an overnight change. That, we have lots of time now to work and embed and see what suits our schools, see what suits our classes, really reflect on our practice and see what things are very, very valuable to us and what are we keeping, and what things are we taking on board and adapting from the curriculum. Our job then, where Maths My Way comes from, is like we see it as our job to help you teachers and to help the school leaders to really enact this in your classrooms, and to make that as a smooth transition as possible. I'm not going to spend too long talking about the curriculum itself. I will refer back to it over and over again, but this is just one page I really wanted to focus in on to kind of ground us in our discussion tonight. This infographic is from the curriculum, and I've chosen it because it's a really nice kind of reflection tool in terms of how we're getting on with the new curriculum. If I wanted to see how I was getting on, I think I'd start with this page and use it as kind of an audit, going through the different points, but turning them into questions. So if I zoom into reasoning for a second and pull up those elements there. So we have these are the parts of the reasoning element. Like we have the second one there, argue and justify their thinking. So if I was turning this into a question to see how I'm getting on with the new curriculum, I'd say, are there opportunities in my room for children to argue and justify their thinking? Or are there chances for the students to question and evaluate evidence? Do they get to generalize their learning to other areas? Are those opportunities there? So it's a good way to go through the different elements. We have the reasoning, the understanding, communicating, our understanding and connecting, communicating and applying and problem solving, to go through each of them, maybe individually, maybe as a staff, and see which areas do you feel really confident with, or which areas do you think might be ones that you could focus on going forward. So it's just a nice way to really focus on what's happening in your classroom, rather than seeing the curriculum as something that's just online or something that's out there, really embedding it. And we'll be coming back to that as we look at some examples from Maths My Way. Just want to show you the contents then. This is from third class book, I think, and it's broken down into 30 units, and there's 2 look back units. I would say when you start a new curriculum program in next September, if you take on a new program, I would highly advise skipping that revision unit that's at the start of most books. Because if the children haven't used the series the year before, then all of the content will be pretty new for them, especially if it's their first time using a new curriculum program. So one of the pitfalls that we fell into in our school is that if you started with that let's get started chapter at the start of September and they haven't done it last year, it's going to be very challenging that first week as you're kind of teaching every topic from scratch, or teaching all the things that they haven't seen before from scratch. So I'd highly suggest for your first year of implementing any new curriculum book to start with the second chapter, which would be the first chapter of content. Again, the order here is something that this is our suggested order. It matches the yearly plan that comes with the program, but feel free to adapt this to suit the needs of your school and your classes as well. It's not set in stone. Okay, so just to look at how we're aligned then across the series. So to help with the whole school planning in particular, we've matched the topics across the books so that you're in different classes, you'll be teaching the same topic at the same time, as far as was possible. Like in some year groups, there's extra units needed on a certain topic. So, but as you can see with the colors there, for the most part, the same topics are covered at the same time in each book. This helps with, like, if you're doing whole school initiatives around a topic, or if there's particular displays that you want to put up in the hallways in school to match certain times of the year. And in particular at each stage. So for third and fourth class, stage 3, they're very closely aligned, and similarly stage 4, 5th and 6th class are very, very closely aligned as well. But as I said, this can be adapted to suit the needs of your school, and all of the plans that are available on MyFolans are editable as well. So it's very straightforward to change them to suit your context. That brings us then into the planning and the fortnightly plans. So I found these huge help this year, having the fortnightly plans there ready to go with all of the headings you need from the latest guidance, and all of your curriculum content brought out and put into these plans for you. So you have your broad learning outcomes that are addressed over 2 years. You have your mathematical concepts and your language. You have your assessment, your differentiation, all here for you on 2 pages. So this is the main page, and then the second page goes through day by day what to cover. One area I really want to focus on is this center spot, which is the focus of new learning. So this is for 3rd class, and it's one of the fractions units. And this is where we've broken the curriculum down into the targets for this specific week. So when we were writing the unit of fractions for 3rd class, we had to look at what did the curriculum say. So we had our learning outcomes, but they were really broad. They were for 3rd and 4th class. We had our mathematical concepts that, again, were for 3rd and 4th class. And then we had the toolkit with the progression steps. So we had to take all of this information and organize it into manageable learning targets that could be the focus of a lesson for each day. So you see, in each week or in each unit of work, there'll be 4 main targets of learning, and the focus of learning. They'll be teased out then by the lesson activities, by the teaching slides, which we'll look at next. When we were coming up with these targets, you might be asking, like, where do we get the language for them? Where did they come from? And really we were very true to the toolkit and the progression steps. So here you'll see in under fractions and reasoning, we've pulled out that one there to show you. So it's compares and orders unit fractions with different denominators. And that matches up with our focus of new learning for lesson 3. Compare and order unit fractions using models. You'll notice it's not exactly the same. And that's because when you open up the toolkit for fractions, there's 2 or 3 pages there across all of the elements, with progression steps for the children to look at over their time in primary school for the topic of fractions. So we took those steps with the learning outcome and the concepts in mind, and broke them down into the targets and split them across the different units of fractions that come up. So it's about putting things together that make sense. So here in the reasoning section, it was compares and orders unit fractions. And from the communicating section, we took the idea of modeling, of creating their own models to talk about fractions, and put those bits together to make that focus for lesson 3. So when you're using Maths My Way, you can really rest assured that the ideas and that focus of new learning comes directly from the curriculum. It's been adapted, it's been used to make sure we're covering everything that's in there, but you can really feel confident that it is the curriculum that you're teaching. You'll see then that the focus of new learning appears again on the introductory slide of each set of lesson slides that go with the week's work. So on that fortnightly plan where we had fractions, we had our 4 targets, and you'll see then there's 4 lessons to match. Each lesson has a set of slides, and it has 1 page of the student book to go with it. But the page of the student book is embedded into the slides themselves. So it's not like you're flicking from one to the other, trying to figure out what comes next or what the order is. As you go through the slides, which I'll show you later, the bits from the student book are there for you in the slides, so that it's your whole lesson from start to finish is in the slides there for you, all embedded. On the title slide, as well as the focus of new learning, you'll see the hands-on resources that are needed for the particular lesson, and you'll also see the page in the student book labelled that's associated with that set of slides. On the right, you see 2 extra pages there, and they're 2 practice pages that go at the end of each unit. Sometimes these might be used for extra work during lessons for children who are, who need extra activities to work on. Sometimes you might use them as a Friday activities. Sometimes they might be used for homework. There's loads of ways that they can be used, but they're aligned to the 4 lessons and follow the same flow of content as the 2 lessons. And it's extra activities there for you to use as best suits your classroom. So we're going to have a look at some of the activities that come up in this unit now, just to give a flavour of what a week using Maths My Way could look like, and some of the activities and the types of things you'll see. So we use so much hands-on resources. Those concrete materials are really important with the new curriculum and for children to learn maths. And we try to make them as accessible as possible. So in this one, for example, we're using paper, where the children get a strip of paper and they're folding it to make halves, then quarters, then eighths. And they're building those fractions, building that visual representation in their mind of what these fractions look like, or what the fractions look like and how they relate to each other. You see on the slide there as well, we have like there's a video that goes with it to help demonstrate what the children need to do. There's top tips throughout the slides to just give extra information without cluttering the book. So to start off, it's hands-on, it's active, and it builds then to our activities where the children are comparing and ordering, back to that outcome we looked at earlier. So here the children are comparing unit fractions. The first one there is 1/8 or 1/5, where and they can rely back on their strips. They can use those strips that they made in the previous lessons to help them with these activities if they need. It's earmarked at the end of the first lesson to keep the resources for the week. So whatever strips you've made, keep them in your folder so that if you need them again during the next lesson, that you have them to hand. Important words to note in the second activity is that it's not just which fraction is greater. It's also convince a partner. using fractions, circles, or strips. So we have that reasoning there, the justifying, the convincing brought in. And after mentioning that, I'll bring us back to the reasoning section of the elements that we looked at earlier. And one of the points under reasoning is to argue and justify their thinking. So the activity hasn't particularly changed. Like with an old curriculum resource, you might have asked the children which is greater, put in the correct symbol, 1/8 or 1/5. But in that activity, the answer is the most important thing. Here, what we're looking for is that arguing and justifying, that it's not just about which answer is right, but also how can you show me that it's right? How can you prove it to a partner that it's correct? Can you use the physical strips to do it? But then also as an extension, if you didn't have the strips, could you come up with an argument to help with that too? That builds in then to this later activity where instead of just having to compare, the children have these 4 fractions to compare and to order from smallest to greatest. Again, they have the resources from the earlier in the week to help them, and there's the word bank that they can use to help with their maths talk as they go to. This is one that I was doing recently with my own class, and we had done so much work with the strips, with the different ordering things. And I put this up, and straight away there were hands up going, "Oh, come on, give us a challenge. These are too easy," saying things like that. That they really, they had done so much with these fractions that they found it straightforward. So gave them a similar question with different fractions. The next ones had like 3rds, 6ths, and 7ths, all unit fractions, so all with 1 as the numerator. These were all fractions that they hadn't made with the strips. So in the question on the slide, they had something that they could fall back on to physically to look at. This time it was more abstract. But they applied their understanding to these new fractions from the question they'd done before. So, they had that idea of how to order unit fractions, that the greater the denominator, the bigger the fraction of the whole will be. And again, this brings us back to our reasoning, that the children were generalizing their learning to other areas. It wasn't just the fractions that they made that they could apply their thinking to, but they could extend it out to different fraction families as well. Now, that question that they looked at, they also found that quite straightforward. So again, changed it again and changed it to non-unit fractions. So like, 2/3 or actually 3/4, 4/5, ones that they had fraction strips to represent, but non-unit fractions. And that brought them back again to have to question their thinking, because with the previous 2 questions that were all with 1 as a numerator, they had come up with one rule. But then when it changes, that rule doesn't necessarily hold. And they had to go back to the strips, go back to actually physically seeing what these fractions look like and building that understanding a little bit further. And again, we're always thinking about, why are we doing an activity? We're trying to build towards that idea of generalizing, that what we learn today isn't standalone. It's not just learned and done, that we're bringing that with us as we go on to the next unit, to the next whatever other subjects or whatever other topics we're looking at, and bringing the ideas with us, and they're transferable into the different things that we come up with. Next activity that came up in the series of lessons was to look at then finding a fraction of a set. So this was 5 children sharing 30 cherries equally. And what was important here was that the children were solving this in many different ways. So it wasn't just a question and find the answer. It was all about, how did you find your solution? Is there more than one way to do it? Some of the ways that came up when we were looking through this, one child drew 5 circles and shared 30 dots between them, drawing out the 30 dots. Some counted in fives to help them find out. Some had the physical resources out using cubes, and some used more of a trial and error approach where they tried 5 times 5, saw that that was too small, and then tried tried 6 times 5. Here you see the idea with the resources as well, that the cubes were accessible to the children, but not everyone was necessarily using them. Different children were using different strategies to solve this. Some children only solved it in one way, maybe by drawing dots or using the cube, whereas other children solved it in more than one way. A lovely strategy to kind of get children thinking in different ways is to ask them, after they've had a little while doing it, ask them to talk to each other and see can they find another way at their table that they'd like to record in their copy or on their whiteboard. That that they can learn from each other, see how different children are doing things, and see if that helps them to understand the topic better. Back to our reasoning element again, and we see in it analyze and deduce ideas, strategies, and solutions. So they're coming up with their own ideas here. They're deducing their ideas, but they're also analyzing. They're looking at what their classmates have done, and they are using that to it and adapting it for their own solutions. It's very important, I feel, or in my class, I think it's very important to get multiple solutions and really look at how children are solving things rather than just the answer. So when you ask a question like the cherries one, like some children could come up with an answer really quickly, but it could just be a number rather than showing any great understanding. Like, some children might have used the patterns they know, just counted in fives because they saw five and they felt that that was a strategy they'd used recently. But if this fraction changed to what is 3/5, that wouldn't work for them anymore. Some other children might have heard an answer at the table, or they might have worked with someone to get an answer. But taking the time to really look at, can we find other ways to do this, allows them to delve a bit deeper, and to really see if there's different ways that they can think about the topic. If children are finished early, asking questions like, can you use these cubes to help Sarah find a solution? Help them explain it to another child. Really valuable in terms of showing another level of understanding. And really like delving into why a number is a solution. Some other prompts you could use to extend tasks are like, prove it to me, draw a picture to convince me. Maybe someone just told you an answer, but can they draw a picture that explains it? Find someone at your table who did it a different way, explain your way to them and listen to their way. And can you use their way in your copy or on your whiteboard? Can you make sense of it? What if there were 80 cherries? This idea of a parallel task where the task stays the same. You're not re-explaining any new concept or any new background to the task, but just changing the number to add that little bit of extension. Similarly, in the opposite direction, you could say, what if there were 10 cherries? So can you change that way too? Or can you make and solve your own version of the cherries problem? The children always, in my class, always love doing that as well. There's just some ideas of, all the different directions you can take one task, one problem, word problem, but bring it in lots of different directions and really delve deep into it. And that's when you see a problem like this on the slides of Maths My Way, especially at the start of a lesson. That's the kind of point of it, to really get deep into the maths that's behind that task, and then to see what ideas we can pull from that and help children build their understanding around the topics. So we're going to have a look at some of the slides now, and in particular the strategies that are on the slides. One thing I'd always suggest is that you go through the slides before beginning your lesson. So to get a sense of like, what's the focus of the lesson, what's the lesson trying to build. Just by flicking through those slides really helps to show you what the purpose is. When we're talking about the examples that the children came up with themselves, like the ones I showed you earlier, I always prefer to use those with my class. Like, I think ideas that the children have come up with themselves are always going to be the most powerful tool you have in the maths classroom. It gives them ownership. Seeing an idea up on the board with their name written beside it, and then you're asking other children to try and use their way, like that's giving them such ownership of the maths that's being used. We also have solution strategies on the slides that are there kind of as a backup. Maybe maybe you don't to really look at what the different to really get all the children's ideas up on the board, and you just want to use the ones that are on the slide some days. Maybe the children don't come up with every way that you want to look at in that particular day, and then you can use the strategies on the slide as well. But I find that the ideas that the children come up with themselves are always so valuable. And then if I'd value those more than maybe showing solutions on the board, so then I'd skip some of those slides to allow more time for going through that. It can be nice if there's something new that you haven't seen before to go through it on the slide. So I'm just going to flick over to the slides to have a quick look at what's there. Just before I do, at the end of this section, you'll see some examples of tasks that we've chosen for each class level that you might like to try out with your own class. So they'll be there for you at the end, that you can click on the links to get through to them. So just to have a look at the slides then, sorry, I have to stop sharing and share again. Okay, so this is what the slides look like. You have your navigation tool for flicking through the lesson to see the different slides, or to pick up, like, for example, if you didn't get a lesson finished one day, if one task, just the children were coming up with so many great ideas for it that it took longer than you anticipated and you didn't get through a lesson a day, you can easily navigate back and forward here. You have your play button for moving on to the different parts, your volume control, and we always recommend viewing the slides in full screen. It just makes all of the interactive polypad elements work properly. It makes everything as big as possible for the children. You also have your links to your teaching notes and your printables up here, and your drawing tools if you want to annotate the slides, but I'm sure everyone has that built into their whiteboards anyway. Here's the slide we looked at a second ago, and this is an example of the interactive elements that are built in. So anytime you see this P symbol, that's Polypad, and if you click on that, it will pop you out to the Polypad app with the digital resources there ready to go for you. Once you have that, there's also a way to share that you can use generate QR code to share that to students' own devices as well. Handy if you don't have the physical resources. So we had our activity there that, as I showed you the slides earlier, the children came up with their own ideas to that. But these are the slides where we give solution strategies for the children to look at. So we use our characters, in this case it's Blaze, and it goes through how you might solve the problem. Again, I find these so valuable at the start of a lesson when I'm flicking through it to see what are the expected or anticipated solutions that the children will come up with from a particular activity. So here, the first strategy is using counters. There are 5 children, so you have the 5 children shown, and then we're sharing the counters between the 5 groups. The beauty of having these on the slides rather than printed in the book itself is that they're interactive, as you see here, and it just helps to illuminate what we're trying to show with the different solution strategies. So each child gets one of these 5 groups. Each child gets 1/5 of the charts. And the different characters then, so Wind goes on to model the problem with a bar model. where there are the total number of cherries with the counters split into 5 equal parts. And each part shows the cherries that each child gets. And then they're brought down to show 30 shared between the 5 groups is 6. The children in your class might have come up with something similar to this that isn't quite a bar model. They might have just drawn 5 circles and put the number 6 in each one. And it can be interesting to show a connection between Wynn's way and what they had done. So sometimes you might use the solutions on the board to kind of show similarities or differences between ways the children had solved the problem and some of the ones that are on the board. You see there as we go through it, the maths talk prompts come up regularly as well. And then you're on to a next problem where the children can use some of the strategies they've come up with, use some of the strategies their peers have come up with, use some of the strategies maybe they've seen on the slides, and work on a similar task. Just last slide to show is when it comes to an activity from the textbook. So the first textbook activity we come to is activity A, and you'll see it's signposted up on the side that this is on page 129 of the book. So your entire flow of the lesson is here in the slides for you. So I hope that was helpful. Any questions you have, stick them into the chat, and as we go through the next the panel discussion, we'll get a chance to look at them and get back to you on them.
Thanks a million, Patrick. It's so lovely actually hearing the examples from your own class. Patrick and I have been here now 3 years in a row, I think, doing webinars on Maths My Way, and Patrick was always testing out ideas with it, with whichever class he had at the time. But it's so lovely to have had nearly a whole year now of Patrick using the program with his class and hearing these examples coming up, and regularly texting me about how things have gone and the kind of solutions that some of the students in his class have come up with. It's just to see it in real life and kind of the impact of it is brilliant. But of course, Patrick and I are quite biased because we have worked on this program for so long. So that is why we've invited 2 teachers to join us this evening on the webinar, who have absolutely nothing to do with the development of the program, and to share their experience of introducing it into their school. So I've got Siobhan and Maggie. Hopefully we can get them on and their cameras and mics on. So I can see their icons there, but brilliant. There's Siobhan. And wait, have we got Maggie as well? Sorry, my screen is actually very small. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I can see Maggie.
You both, lovely. For some reason it's only showing me Siobhan. So let you both introduce yourselves first. So we'll start with you, Siobhan.
Yeah, so I am a 5th class teacher in Limerick Educate Together, and I also am the maths coordinator for the school as well. So that's why I was, I suppose, so involved in programs, what we were going to pick as a program for our school.
Thanks, Siobhan. And Maggie?
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I'm the 6th class teacher in Limerick Educate Together. And yeah, I kind of just encourage Siobhan to follow her dreams.
Lovely. So a couple of questions, just short things, just to put you both. And I know we did this a couple of weeks ago as well when we did our webinar, and it was a great response actually from the attendees, just to hear from teachers like yourselves who've been through it. So the first one is for you, Siobhan, kind of in your position as maths coordinator. So when you were kind of this time last year looking at the key priorities for your school in choosing a new program, what were they, and how did Maths My Way fit into that picture for you?
Yeah, so I suppose when we started with the PMC, when we started with the primary maths curriculum, we really wanted to make things like as manageable and kind of as easy, I suppose, for the teachers as we could. So we kind of focused on doing things bit by bit. So we introduced all the pedagogical practices individually. We did them one at a time, kind of like starting with maths talk and built up into something else, and then looking at maths journals. And this was, I suppose, our way of just trying to kind of build a bit of confidence in the program. And we didn't want anyone to feel like really overwhelmed or like, they didn't know what they were doing. So because this was something new, and I suppose it's a bit overwhelming getting all these new curriculums put in on top of us. So we started off doing them kind of one by one, which helped, I suppose, us then just build up a bit of confidence in what we were doing. So once we kind of had a really good understanding of the maths curriculum itself, of the new PMC, I started looking at programs, and we started with the junior end first, because the programs for them came out first. And I suppose when we were looking through all the programs, the reason that we looked at Maths My Way so much, or why we kind of kept coming back to it, why it fitted so well into what we were doing, is because it took on those kind of pedagogical practices that we had looked at. We felt that it had done it really well with all the maths talk and the cognitive challenging tasks. And the teachers really liked it then because it was so child friendly. Like, the characters are really engaging, the slides are great, they're so visual, and they really make it accessible for the pupils. Another thing that really appealed to us was the use of Polypad in within the lessons themselves. We were using Polypad a lot inside at our school and in the classes. So we really liked that was actually built into the lessons as well. You didn't have to go looking for it yourself, it was already there. Then the resources that she had were really good. The planning was great. It really helped to focus us on our planning, and then also kind of took away, I suppose, a bit of the time that it would take for you to start your planning from scratch, so you could actually focus on the actual teaching, the quality of your teaching, the learning that was coming out of it. And it just made the transition to the new curriculum, we thought, more achievable. And I suppose it gave us a bit more of a positive outlook on what we were doing.
Yeah, it sounds like you really did put a lot of thought and planning into that as well, even the work you'd done in the school before you even looked at a program, which I think is something that often comes out of these discussions for us as well, is about going gently, taking your time, making sure that a program is right for you. And I'm sure, and I know from speaking to you both, it wasn't without its challenges, because any new curriculum will have its challenges, and adopting a new program will have its challenges. So Maggie, you might speak to us a little bit about some of the challenges you did face in bringing in the new program, and then kind of what helped you to work through those.
Yeah, so I think maybe the biggest challenge that I found bringing it into 6th class was time. I found that it did take a huge amount of time, like going through all the slides. So there's a huge amount of content there in Maths My Way. So for me, I kind of wanted this sense of, well, what is my overarching priority this week? What is it that I want to achieve? Because if I was trying to do everything that is outlined for the week in Maths My Way, it just wouldn't be achievable. And then I'd be only kind of scratching the surface, and there'd be no real discovery or deep learning. So it does, going through the slides, there's 4 sets of slides per week, going through those and kind of picking out, I really want to focus on that. This isn't overly important right now. That takes a bit of time, and you are just always trying to prioritize, this is where the kids are, this is what the priority needs to be for this week. So it does, the planning, even though the plan is there in front of you, it's a new plan and you haven't done it before, so it's kind of a little bit of trial and error, and some of the lessons are a disaster and some of the lessons are brilliant, and you're kind of why was this really good and why was that? So it did take a lot of reflection as well. But that, it wouldn't really matter what program we would have gone with, because time is always going to be an issue for teachers. Teachers are just time poor. So therefore, I suppose when I compared it to last year, when we were, just trialing out different things, what was really challenging last year is we were going to lots of different places. So we're using our old program. Then we were looking at obviously the new PMC and looking at the outcomes and looking at the learning progressions. Then we were also looking at the IDA hub. So we spent a lot of time taking things out of the hub, a lot of time kind of developing our own journaling techniques, and using Polypad. So the beauty this year, even though it does take time going through the slides and looking at what your week is going to look like, everything is there in front of you. So you're not going from one website to another website to another website and going down these incredible, rabbit holes of what are they doing in New Zealand. You're more focused, okay, well, I have everything here in front of me. So what is it that I'm going to focus on with the students in my class? I think another thing, which is a beautiful thing in Maths My Way and with the new PMC, is there's a huge expectation of children to be really active and engaged learners. And it can be an expectation that a lot of them have these skills already in 6th class. But I suppose it's just remembering and being kind to them and being kind to ourselves that a lot of them would have come up interacting with maths in quite a rudimentary way, where it might have been a lot of chalk and talk and a lot of I show and you do. And now we're kind of completely flipping this on the head. So the role of the teacher is not so much as this like filler of an empty vase. It's now this orchestrator of learning. So you're there, you know, like facilitating the discussion, you're facilitating the task, you're facilitating, okay, I'm going to pick this, I'm going to pick that, or this is a misconception, or we're going to spend a bit of time on that. So there's a lot of more fluidity within the class, but it puts a lot of the onus on the students that, you know, we're expecting them to be risk takers, to be creative, we're expecting them to be innovative, and we're expecting them like to you know, model their thinking and think of different ways, think outside the box. What's this person doing? What's that person doing? And I suppose what I found challenging is that the skills of being an active learner are still developing in 6th class, because it hasn't been the culture the whole way up for them. So that was one thing that I find that the kids found challenging. And it did take time then as a teacher modeling, what does active listening look like? What does sustained attention look like in the classroom? Like, repeat what John said. Do you see what Frank said? Things like that. And then putting a huge amount of focus on the effort. So the beauty of the slides in Maths My Way, like with the open, like cognitively challenging task, is there's no real right or wrong answer, or we're not looking for an answer. We're actually just looking for opinions. We're just looking for ideas. We're just giving it a go, being a risk taker. It doesn't really matter, because there's never a time where you go, yes, you're right, and actually, no, you're wrong. It's more like, this is just our collective thinking about like the cherry problem that you had there. It's just a collective thinking. And then you're like, it's so discussion based. The idea of like, it's not about having your hands up, you're going to be asked. It's like everyone is going to be asked their opinion. So it's changing a culture in your classroom. And maybe you've already changed that culture, but like, it's still, even to this day, and because we've been doing it now, you know, since September, students still will automatically put their hands up to answer a question, rather than kind of going, oh, like I could just pick out a popsicle stick and your name just happens to be on it. But you do have the right to pass, like nobody's going to put pressure on you. But it is very much like a shift in culture, as like, you are the learner and I'm the facilitator of your learning. I'm not like going to just vomit out stuff for you then to regurgitate back to me. And then I think another area that I found challenging is that my interpretation then of the learning outcomes, in some instances, were quite different to, say, the Maths My Way interpretation of the learning outcomes. So what I would feel like, oh, I'm not like, when I was looking through the slides, like, I don't know if that's how I would go about providing a learning experience with, I don't know, directed numbers, or with highest common factor, or things like that. I might have a very different notion of what that would look like in a 6th class classroom. So it's, for me then, it's kind of like giving up on my own kind of like thoughts about that and just giving something different a go. And in some instances, like, it worked out really well. In some instances, I'm like, no, actually, I prefer like how I would normally challenge, like, tackle this like directed number. I prefer actually what we would normally do with that. So it's just knowing that as a teacher, you still have the autonomy. Like, it's not, this is just a program as a resource to facilitate learning. This is not like something set in stone that you must follow slide by slide, because then that's just unrealistic. Like, everyone's class is going to be different. Everyone has different children in it. So those were kind of the challenges.
Yeah, I think that's all, like, it's such good points that you're making, Maggie, in terms of like, there's no such thing as a perfect program. We got what you do in your classroom is not going to be, you know, what Siobhan's doing in her classroom, what Patrick's doing in his, and what so many other teachers on here this evening are doing in their classroom. So it's that learning to adapt. It's taking the time to trial out a few things, see what worked for you, what went well, see what you want to do a bit differently, and that's like, there's room for that in Maths My Way, I think. And it's funny you mentioned about having one place to go, because, and you mentioned specifically seeing what they're doing in New Zealand. Patrick and I can tell you, we had a lot of time looking at what they're doing in New Zealand.
I think everyone does. I know.
Wonderfully. And that was the time that we spent in creating the program, was looking at all these things. What are people doing around the world? What's working well? And trying to bring all that together into one place to give teachers that starting point that you're talking about, you know. So, and I think it's going gently with yourself as well, and, you know, trying all those things and creating the kind of the culture for that in your classroom as well. And that's not easy when they've had, like you said, 7-8 years of doing things maybe a slightly different way. So fair play for getting them to where you've gotten them to as well, I think. And on that note, what kind of impact or changes have you kind of noticed with the students from kind of trying things in, you know, a different way?
So it's quite interesting. I have two maths groups. So because we're sixth class, we rotate the students so they get different teachers for different subjects, just as a help with the transition to secondary school. And the two groups are very, very different groups. So I've one quite like, boisterous and like they would fight with their shadow sort of a group that are have no problem sharing their opinions, that like talk, 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 talk. But the biggest problem is they never listen. Like they do not listen to each other at all. So they were the group with the hands up, thinking about what they want to say. I'm waiting for what I want to say, but I'm not listening to Frank in the corner. Frank in the corner can talk, and then it's my turn next. It's my turn next to say my piece. So it's lovely kind of getting this sense that we are a community. So it's the disposition I felt has been a huge change in the classroom for mathematics. So it's the idea that like we are mathematicians together. So we listen and we respond to each other's ideas. And that has been a lovely shift for that first group of students. The other group of students then I felt they had a really fixed mindset when it came to mathematics. I would say good 80% of the class had a very fixed mindset. They did not like maths. They were not good at maths. They would just sit in silence. There was a lot. I mean, the first, I would say, month, even 5 weeks, was a lot of just crickets in the classroom, because obviously you give the thinking time, and like you might have think pair share where they're going to share with a partner and then they're going to feed back. And even with the feedback, it was just silence. Like nobody wanted to say anything. It was, and then like, if you pulled the popsicle stick out, it was like, oh, I prefer to pass. Oh, I prefer to pass. Or so it's taking them from that quite very self-conscious, very, like, I can't do this. I don't want to, I'm afraid of being wrong, I think was the biggest fear they had. And I'm afraid people are going to laugh at me, or people are going to think I'm silly or whatnot. To students who are well able now to share their ideas in the maths class and don't really worry if it's right or it's wrong. It doesn't really matter. There's personally, I put very little focus on the right answer. Of course, we do want the kids to get the right answer, but the idea is it's your effort. It's like, we're looking in sixth class because we can always have the sort of the tagline that you get points for the more you show your work. So it's like, it's a nice kind of incentive that just put everything down, just like everything, just write everything down, draw everything, because you get points for everything. So that helps them just build this sense of confidence that actually, do you know what, I can do it. I mightn't find the right answer, but I can do something. I find that the kids became quite more active in their learning. They became more creative and just a little bit more playful with it, that it is a bit of fun. And when you have the open tasks, using Polypad or using the resources, they're trying to outdo each other to make it like as ridiculously complicated as it is by going around the world to cross the street, so it's just like all this fantastical on Polypad, even if they're just making a net of a cube, it's like, oh yes, but maybe it could be like this if we lived in space. And so it's just it's this idea that it's all like, it's fun. It's really fun and engaging. So that I find has been a huge success of Maths My Way. And I think as the years go on, it will just get stronger and stronger. And I can see it myself as I'm coming towards the end of the school year with the kids, that, oh my gosh, like if I had, like next year now, they've gone through all of this in fifth class. So it's not, there's not going to be as much crickets in the classroom or silence or fear, or, they're going to be used to, it's just give it a go. Another, I suppose, for a sixth class teacher, a huge positive for me is the use of calculators. Calculators are included in lots of the learning outcomes, and the use of scientific calculators. And I just find it has made such a big difference in students' confidence using calculators. So they're no longer using them like to write funny words and turn it upside down. They're like, there are actually now a tool for mathematics. And they'd often say, can I go and get a calculator? And it's gone to the stage where calculator is just a normal part of the class, which is super for students who really struggle with procedural fluency. And I mean, you're in sixth class now, like learning times tables, like the boat is left, So the idea that I just have my calculator here and I don't need to worry about the factual things, I can worry about the concept. My calculator then can deal with like, what is 50 times 47 or whatever. And the last thing then I think is done so well in Maths My Way is just the connection and generalizing. So as you move through, we'll say the units or the chapters, whatever you want to call it, like it's the same thing is coming up the whole time. So I was kind of like with directed numbers, we did that very early in the school year, and I felt like, oh my gosh, I didn't spend enough time in directed numbers, but it actually came up again so many times throughout the year. And fractions, decimals, percentages, everything is just coming back all the time. So anytime you're doing measure, you're going back over all of those relationships to number. Like it is really incredible. It's very it's done so well and so natural that it's building a sense that like the maths as a whole, it's not a topic, which I feel like in the older programs happened a little bit, that now I do division, now I do multiplication, whereas in all of them, you'll notice, especially in the 6th class, when you get to the word problems and stuff like that, that they'll always include the different operations. They'll always include fractions, decimals, percentages. So it's great for kids by the end of the year. They have a really strong understanding of those things.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you only kind of start to see coming out once you've used the program, because you've still got your topics, but you can see that connection and that generalizing, as Patrick was talking about, all that kind of stuff that's coming through as you're using the program. And kind of I know a lot of people on the webinar this evening are here because they're thinking about, am I going to change my maths program? Am I going to take on something new, and what direction am I going to go in? So coming back to you, Siobhan, as particularly again in your role as coordinator and your experience as a teacher using it as well, what advice would you give to a teacher or a school thinking about taking on a program like Maths My Way, and what would be, I suppose, your advice to them?
Yeah, so I suppose when we started using it, we started with the junior end, because the 3rd to 6th class program wasn't out yet. So juniors to 2nd had used it first, and they had really liked it and really enjoyed it. Juniors to 2nd obviously like, writing their books and things like that. So it was fine for them to be buying the books every year. So when we started to look at the 3rd to 6th, I was very conscious that when we buy these maths books, we're going to be keeping this program for a long time. So what we decided to do this year for 3rd to 6th was we didn't actually buy the pupil book. We just used the online subscription. And we actually found that, well, I suppose I found that worked really well. It gave us a real insight into the program. Like Patrick said on the slides, like what's in the book is embedded in your slides anyway. So I suppose I didn't necessarily find that I was lacking anything by not having the book. But definitely we found that was one kind of easy way to ease people into the program so that they could see if they liked it, and if they wanted to do it again. And we did it that way. We did the online books. We also went with the fluency books that you have, and we used those then as like our homework books. We found that was really kind of handy as well then to, I suppose, have kind of like a school home link, so that the parents at home would know the topic that we were doing, or maybe how we were doing it, the different new strategies that are coming through as well. And it gave them a chance to see what that was like at home. Another thing that I suppose we looked at was, or another thing that I would give as a bit of advice is kind of like what Maggie said, like, don't worry if they're finding the topic a bit difficult. The way that it's done, like my 5th class didn't do Maths My Way last year. So some of the topics that were coming up, some of the things that were coming out in the chapters, they didn't know about. So I would go back to like the 4th class book and maybe do something from the 4th class book. Like one that comes to my mind straight away is data. The 4th class book in data does the mode, the range, the median. They'd never done that before. The program that we had before didn't do that in 4th class. So I actually went back to the 4th class slides, and I did that as like my day one and my introduction to my topic, and then went and did the 5th class ones. So, I suppose it's, don't worry about having to go backwards a little bit. It's not you going backwards. It's not the children going backwards. It's you just doing a bit of revision with the other books, I suppose, to prepare them for what's now in their new book. We really need to be very mindful that like this program is new, this curriculum is new. A lot of the stuff that we're doing, like Maggie said, and like you've said as well, they've never done this before. This is new for them. It's a new way of doing things. It's a new way of looking at maths. So as well as, I suppose, us going through it in this way for the first time, they are as well. So we have to be very cognizant of that as well. I also would say, like, don't feel pressured about, and this has kind of been said before, but don't put pressure on yourself to get through every single slide. You know, I would definitely agree with Patrick. Go through your slides before you teach them, before your lesson at the start of the week, and kind of pick out what you know your class are able for, what they can do. If you think a topic is going to take you 2 weeks, but it only says 1 week in the book, take 2 weeks to do it. You know, if you think it says 2 weeks in the book and you think it's only going to take one, do it in the one. So it's those kind of things. I also like found kind of jumping around the chapters a little bit handy for like my own self as well. So I suppose what I'm saying is it's all about just, you know, using the program the way that you envisage it in your own classroom and what's best for you and what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the best advice you could give for any program, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. But you know, but at the same time, I would say that out of all the programs that we did look at, this was the one that kind of aligned with what we wanted, and that we found, I suppose, was the best for our class setting, for our school setting. And we have really liked using it this year. I'm doing the book list actually this week and was talking to all the other teachers, and they all wanted to use it again next year, you know. So it's really good to see that the program has had a positive impact on teachers, that they've enjoyed doing it, that they've kind of have a better understanding of the new curriculum through it, and that it also has had a positive impact on the children, you know, and the way that they now view maths, or the way that they see maths now, is completely different to what it was before.
And that's honestly, that's the best feedback we could ever get on any program we put out there, you know, that it's having a positive impact on both teachers and students. So thank you very much for sharing all of that with us, Siobhan and Maggie. Conscious we've really spoken for so long, and we could get into more, but it is 8 o'clock. So what I'm going to do, I think we've probably hit on most of the questions that people ask kind of through our discussion. If there's anything that we haven't managed to answer, please do feel free to follow up with us, get in touch with, you know, your local rep or into our customer service team, and we'll get you an answer if there's something in particular you want to find out about. But what I'm going to do is just share kind of where you can find out more as well. So let me just share my screen again here. Is that coming up for everybody?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect, because sometimes this is where technology lets me down. So just a very quick note on kind of practice, because this is something that comes up. I know some people were asking about it a little bit in the chat, and Siobhan mentioned the fluency books there as well, and it's just something that it is a change in the new curriculum, and it's something that people think, oh God, you know, are we going to have enough practice? Are kids going to develop that fluency that they need and that procedural fluency? So just a note on that, if that's something that is a concern for you as you're thinking about new programs, is that there are so many different avenues for practice within the already wrapped up in the Maths My Way program. So something we sometimes refer to as hidden practice, which is really all that means is when you look at a page, you might see one problem, but out of that one problem, you could get 20-30 different iterations of it. So that particular one I have on screen there is just using digit cards to create a division, and there's so many different divisions that you can create through that. So it's kind of just giving these frames that can be used over and over again and get a lot of practice through it. But it's that little bit more playful, it's a little bit more interactive. It's not just the pages and pages of divisions. We have a more practice button on a lot of our slides. So if it's kind of a topic where we know that sometimes a little bit more practice is needed to just embed a bit of understanding, develop a bit of fluency, there's a button there. If you need it, you just click on it, it'll bring you to another slide with more questions of the same type. We do have the practice pages, which Patrick mentioned. I know someone asked about where they are as well. That's at the end of every chapter in the book. So that's, again, extra practice. We do have a new kind of early finisher activity section coming for September. So that'll be a new feature that everyone will get in September, which are just those open-end kind of activities, very similar to what you probably would find it throughout the program already, but we're just going to have an extra bank of them. As something which hopefully again will help us in the multi-grade context as well, where you're managing kind of different age groups and you need maybe something for children to get really stuck into while you're working with a different group. And we also have printable worksheets, many of which are already available as part of the digital package on Folan's library, and we've more of those we're going to add over the summer this year as well. So there's lots more going to be there in September. So just a note on that, if that's something that is a concern for you, there is plenty of practice available there. And that's just within the main Maths My Way program. There are other books as well, and I know people were kind of asking about this in the chat earlier. So there are fluency books, which Siobhan and Maggie have used this year, which are kind of like your shadow books that you'd find in other programs, and they mirror the topics used in Maths My Way. They have a Monday to Thursday structure so that you can assign homework from them if that's something that suits you and suits your kind of context. Or we know a lot of schools for homework like to do mixed topics so that you're getting a little bit of revision all the time on all your topics. Those kind of that style that I'm sure you've seen before. Sometimes they're referred to as mental maths books. So we have our own version of that has just launched actually. We've 3 of those are in our warehouse at the moment, and the other 3 are on their way in. So just to give you a really quick look at that, if it's something that's relevant for your school, that format there on my screen, I'm sure you've seen before. It's the kind of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, same number of questions every day, same order of questions every day, and a lot of time has gone for the team who worked on this. A lot of time went into the design, the wording, just trying to make sure it was accessible, the children could use it independently, and they've turned out beautifully. So that they're a really nice take on that kind of regular mixed topic practice. So if that's, and they have the structure there. So if that's something that is relevant for your context in your school, something that you are interested in, you can find out more about that as well from your local sales rep. And that leads me to what's next. So the very best way to figure out basically if a program is right for you is to try it. So you can get your hands on samples by getting in touch with us with your local sales rep, or you just into our customer service here, go onto our website, you'll find all the details, and there's a survey going to go out to you at the end of this webinar where you can just tick if you'd like some samples. So nice and easy for you, and you can get a trial of the digital content on Folan's library as well. So get in there, try some tasks, maybe pick a topic that you're teaching between now and the end of the year and teach it from Maths My Way, or use some of the resources from Maths My Way to get a feel for it. And there's the samples that Patrick mentioned earlier in the slides that you'll get tomorrow as well, with just some activities we've picked out. And I keep mentioning them, but do contact your local sales rep as well. They'd be more than happy to talk to you about offers, deals, packages that are good for your school. As Siobhan and Maggie said, they're using the digital only this year, which is an option if that's something you want to do to introduce it. And just try it for a year with the digital and not commit to the books. That's absolutely fine. Or maybe your school doesn't use books. That's not a problem there. So you can get in touch with them, have a chat. They'll come into you, do demos. They'll be only delighted to answer any questions you have. And then finally, just to mention, there is a survey. The link for this will be posted into the chat here if it hasn't been already. India's in the background there working away on that. And it'll also be sent out to you all tomorrow. So don't worry about if you don't pick it up now. But in that, you can give us your details to get your complimentary teacher's yearbook. You'll be entered into a draw to win a class set of Maths My Way. And also that's where you can request demos, trials, samples, etc. And that finishes it up at 8 minutes past 8. I think we did okay. Thank you all very much. Especially thank you to Siobhan, Maggie and Patrick for joining me this evening. And then thank you to everyone who just took time out of their evening to listen to us talk about our love of maths. We always appreciate that. And any of you who go on to use the program, I really hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks a million, everyone.